All right, hi everyone. For this version of the marker Mayhem, we are working with what is called India ink. Basically, it is a waterproof, permanent, when dry ink, and I don't know honestly if there are other brands that specifically use an India ink. I mean, I know there are, but I don't know what brands, because I actually just use the Pt pens. I was originally introduced to them when I first started learning how to draw in a group that was specifically just for drawing. It wasn't actually designed for you know, like any particular type of drawing, and it wasn't designed for mixed media or art journaling or anything. It was just a drawing group, and we were encouraged to, you know, not use erasers and to draw, you know, as you're learning to draw with ink, especially when you're doing, like, you know, life studies and things like that, where it's more about capturing the image than it is about you know, creating a final piece or anything. It's, you know, when it's practice, in other words. So Pt pens were one of the brands and types of permanent ink that was recommended to me. I did a trade. I had a few. I probably had about I don't know, maybe 10 color of the different colors of the Pt pens, and I had a few of the big brush pens when they came out. But then I did an art trade with someone. Sent me, as part of the trade, all of these beautiful colors. So I actually have quite a variety of them. I don't recommend you going out and buying a ton of them just for this class. And the reason, just like it is with every other one of these Marker Mayhem classes, is that this is really designed to examine each type of marker and how I, you know, use them, in the hope that you'll find one that you really love, and then, you know, invest money into them. You know, markers don't last forever, in the respect that you know, they only have so much ink in them, especially this particular type, which are not refillable. So, and they can be pricey unless you can find them, you know, in a good deal. So I don't recommend buying a bunch of them until, you know, you have an idea of whether you like them. And you can make a face with just one color or just 2 or 3 and still do all the shading and everything that I teach. You don't have to have a whole lot of colors. Now, there's a nice variety of peaches in this little set that I received, and these 3 typically are the ones that I use you know, for skin when I'm not using a lot of other colors. So I'll tell you the numbers for these. It's number 132, number 131, and number 189. And you actually could do an entire face with just these 3 colors and not, you know, have to use anything else. Skin, you know, for skin at least. But, you know, as is my typical style, you know, we're not going to do just a plain face. Now, in all the previous classes that we've done for the Marker Mayhem series so far, I have provided a template to, you know, use or draw from, you know, use as inspiration, and it's the same one that I'm using. Today, though, I thought I would freehand a couple of faces, so I'm going to do that and then stop and tear the page out and go ahead and scan it, so I'll have it to offer to you as templates. So is the part of the process of the video, you know, if you've watched if this is the only marker mayhem you take, it won't, you know, make a difference. But if you take any of the other classes, this one, you know, might be a little bit different. They're all a little bit different. It has a, you know, a lot to do with my mood. If I'm in the mood to draw, it has to do with wanting to present a certain number of well-drawn faces to you, and then a certain number that are more like today's, which are kind of on the fly, which is, you know, what we'll do. I don't use, these are permanent, and you know, when you're using just raw paper, they're definitely just going to soak in. They're not going to move around a lot. When I do faces, I accidentally learned this technique probably back in about 2009, when the only set of these markers that I had other than the standard black ones was what is this color? And it's the sepia, I think, set. Sepia, however you say it. I had that set, and then I had like a yellow and a pink. And I accidentally figured out that if you have a painted surface, I had a face that I had, this was back when I was first learning how to do faces. I had a face that I had drawn and then I had painted. And as what happens with a lot of new artists when they're first learning how to draw faces, and learning how, not drawing, but learning how to paint faces, you use a brush and you find that, you know, the tip of a brush as compared to the tip of a marker or a pencil obviously is, you know, different. So because I was so new, I wasn't getting a lot of precise marks. And so I decided I was going to supplement it by using these markers because I had a few of them. And I started, you know, using the marker on the face and then accidentally wiped my hand across it. And because I'm left-handed, that happens a lot. This part of my hand tends to get, you know, over the image. And I realized that, you know, at first I freaked out, which, you know, everyone would, because I'm trying to make this nice face. But then I started playing, and the next thing I was like, you know, wow, I can shade so easy and so beautiful this way. So that was in one of my very first art journals, probably like the second art journal I ever made. The first altered book art journal, in fact, I think it was, that I had ever made. So I learned it a long, long time ago, but then I kind of got away from, you know, that was just like one of those aha moments, but it went nowhere because I got away from even attempting to use markers because I got better at just getting precise, clean marks with my end of my paintbrush. So that's kind of what we're gonna do here, and that being the case, we don't want to work on raw paper. So the first thing that I'm going to do before I start using the pens and before I draw is I'm going to go ahead and just pre-treat the paper so that it's not porous, so that I have a non-porous, slick surface. And typically I get Marker Mayhem course by using just some matte medium. And I thought I would give you some variety today. So before I put the matte medium down, I'm going to put down I'm literally just going to grab some random paint colors, lighter colors for the most part. Just because why not? Right? Why not use lighter colors instead of really dark ones? Since these are not opaque pens, these pens tend to be transparent. I don't want to put really dark colors down because then you wouldn't be able to see the pens as well. Part of my normal, I'm going to kind of talk while I do this. I'm only going to put paint specifically here because I want to give you one that's just a white background. So I'm kind of going to split the page. But I've completely lost my train of thought. I just love it when I do that to myself. It's good to have a wet brush. It doesn't have to be soaking wet. have a wet brush if you really want to smooth out and get some thin, more transparent layers of paint. Because this class is not specifically any particular level of artist, you don't have to be a beginner, but you don't have to be advanced either to take this class. You can be any of the above. Because of that, and I didn't wash out my brush, and pink and green don't mix well. They kind of make muddy colors. That doesn't matter. It really just doesn't matter to me. Okay, I remember what I was where I was at. So, you know, my typical way that I'm working in my art journal, I don't just start with a bare piece of paper. And yet when we teach our classes, often we like don't think about that and teach on blank white paper, but that's not typical for the typical painter, for the typical artist, and specifically mixed media art journal artists. They don't necessarily start, you know, from a blank page. And so I wanted to give you a kind of a nice combination of both a blank one so that you got a nice clean example, but also something a little bit more painterly, or at least mixed media. And now I've used a combination of paints, both craft, well actually I've used all craft paints in fact, and I'm actually going to dip into my container of gesso that I have over here on the side. Now this gesso is, in my opinion, it's a real cheap brand, so it's more like paint in my opinion than it actually is gesso. It's got a consistency that's terrible at, as far as what I expect or like to have out of my gesso. But I'm going to go ahead and rinse my brush this time really quickly. I typically wouldn't use a gesso because it would be, you know, be a little too porous. I'm adding more color down, layering, and because I want to make certain that I've got a good sort of plastic layer going on here, non-porous layer. But that's the reason why I wouldn't use gesso, because it's not, you know, it's actually designed to be absorbent. But in this particular case, this gesso is like paint. It's not gritty. It's not chalky. It's kind of dries kind of to a smooth, silky, satiny finish, which is completely not what you want out of gesso. But it's really cheap, and I use so much gesso that having a really cheap one isn't detrimental. If I need something else, I have more. I have other brands, and clear and black. So, but in this particular case, I needed to have a bunch of it, and it wasn't going to be for actual art. It was going to be for Christmas gift projects and stuff like that. So I just bought some really cheap stuff. All right, so while that's drying, I'm going to go to this side. I don't want it to be real porous. I'm just going to do some golden matte medium. It's just it'll just dry clear. It is matte, but it will still block the paper, act as a barrier, so it will achieve the goal, my goal of having a non-overly porous surface. Now you can apply this very carefully, and have, you know, no missed areas and no brush strokes, or you can, if you're, you know, a little more akin to my style, you can just kind of go with it and be messy and just sort of accept what you get. So I'm just trying to get good coverage, but it isn't, you know, if you, with my particular taste, In art, for me, if I miss areas, if a couple of areas are a little bit porous, for me that has no bearing. That, you know, I'm happy with that. I like the, you know, the kind of imperfect gritty look. So these two pieces really need to dry. So I'm going to let them dry. I'm not, you know, I might hit it with a heat gun a little bit, but I'm kind of getting away from superheating things up, just because I feel like I want, I don't know what the heat does to the actual paints and things. So sometimes I find I'm not heating things up as much. I'm just letting them cure and dry on their own. But I'm going to pause at this point and let this dry, and then when we come back we'll do the actual drawing. Okay, I'm going to start out over here, and I'm not actually going to use any specific type of reference, and so, and I think I've explained this, I probably explained this a lot, but I think it makes an important distinction. When I first started drawing, I learned to draw faces pretty realistically. But I struggled and got frustrated because I wanted to move faster than what a realistic face allows. And the realistic faces take a really long time. So, you know, fast wasn't in the cards. As well, I tend to be a little too precious, I guess you would say, with the more realistic faces. And I wanted something that I could do in my journal that didn't have to be so precise and careful or take so long to do. So I started doing, and when I'm drawing a realistic face, I should say, I use a photo reference because that's the only way for me to make it realistic. I have a very difficult time making something look realistic when I don't use any kind of a photo reference. So I don't like to use a lot of photo references. Because if it's not my own photo, there's copyright issues, etc., etc. So I wanted something that was easier, faster, more laid back for my journals. So I started doing what I would, back in the day, which would have been like in 2008, 2009, something like that, what I called journal girls. And this was back, of course, before I knew there was someone who had the name Journal Girl. But anyway, that's what I called them, was my journal girls. And they're somewhere in between kind of a folk art, whimsical face and a realistic face. And they're not based on a particular photo. I just start drawing from sort of my main sort of dimensions, I guess, you know, and style. And then they morph from there and become, you know, build-ups and have character and become, you know, more unique. But you know, no single one looks exactly the same. One of the reasons why I've never attempted to be an illustrator is because I find that it doesn't come easy to me to draw the same face over and over again, and especially not to draw it with, like, you know, different expressions and all of that. And it seemed kind of boring to me. Now I know there are some people that absolutely love character development. It just, character development wasn't for me. So all of that said, you know, the prelude to all of that is that I'm not going to use any type of a photo reference. So these are going to be, you know, more on the whimsical folk art style of drawing, you know, maybe more of an illustrated drawing than they're going to seem like a person, like a photorealistic drawing of a person. So just kind of getting that out there in advance. I'm not going to talk too much about it. This isn't really like a, you know, face drawing class. This is more a marker class. But I think in some of the videos I have done that, and I have a couple of different classes for that, Painted Faces 1 and 2. So I'm going to just probably mute the rest of this and just get the drawings done. I'm going to start on the white side, and then when that girl's finished, I'll move the camera views and stuff and do this side. But to start out, I'm going to start over.